Welcome everybody to something I haven't quite done before on this channel. Now, I posted about this on my community tab, but for those who don't know, I was originally going to upload a video that I've been working on for a separate project, unrelated to YouTube. But my partner on that asked me to not release it just yet. So in place of that, I present you with a little highlight of a podcast I did with a friend of mine and fellow NBA YouTuber, Mike the NBA Guy. Subscribe to him. I'll put his link in the description. We had a nice conversation talking about why we love basketball, who our favorite players are, and the Celtics pull away in the end.
Yeah.
But, man, for me, that's the one I'm always thinking, jeez.
See, that'd be hysterical, too, as much as I like Red, to be hysterical to just, that's what you get for being so cocky.
Never lost a game.
Which is very similar to how the Celtics won in '69, because they learned about the Lakers had balloons in the rafters.
True. You know where those balloons went after?
Where did they go?
Oh, actually, I forget. Since I wanted to get something out before the new year, I present you with one of my favorite parts of our conversation, where I'm going to talk about two of the craziest NBA games that you really don't hear talked about that much, involving the longest game ever, and players possibly throwing a game to get their coach fired. I hope you enjoy. Do you have any crazy NBA stories or things that you really love?
So, first, literally anything on the Jeff Teagues podcast. Absolutely elite. I love his podcast so much. He's so funny. And there's one that he does talk about, but this would have been my go-to anyway. I said I became a fan in the 2018 playoffs, right? So 2019 is the first year I'm following the NBA at all. So the Jimmy Butler saga in Minnesota was hilarious and insane. Where he went, he beat the rest of the main team with the G League players, called them bums, and told them they couldn't win without him. And then literally 30 minutes later was on TV with Rachel Nichols doing an interview about it. Hysterical. One of the wildest moments in NBA history. James Harden wishes he had this kind of forcing his way off a team ability. Hysterical.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have two stories, actually. I was going to make a video about this because both of these games happened on the same day, January 7th, so I began kind of digging up, is January 7th a cursed day or something? This is a bit of a saga. This is way back 1951, this is January 6th, 1951. So the Indianapolis Olympians, they're playing a game against the Royals, who were in Rochester at this time. The Rochester Royals actually go on to win the 1951 championship because they have Hall of Famers like Arnie Rison, Bob Davies, Bobby Wanzer, and even Red Holtzman, who's more famous for being the coach of the 1970s Knicks when they won the championships. Now, in November of 1950, late November, the lowest scoring game in NBA history happens, which was the famous Lakers-Pistons game that ended with a score of 19-18, because they were literally just playing keep away. This is pre-shot clock. Now, a kind of similar thing happens with this Olympians and Royals game, because this game goes into 6 overtimes. This is the longest game in NBA history. It ends in a score of 73-75. The Olympians win. It's very funny how, through the 48 minutes until the end of regulation, they combined for 130 points, both teams, and then over the next 6 overtimes are 30 minutes, they combine for 18 points. It's keep away. And a reason for this is because when the refs throw up the jump ball at the start of each overtime, the team that wins the tip just holds it until the very last shot of the overtime. Literally, for 5 straight minutes, just holding the ball. And apparently the fans start booing, and some even demand refunds. So this is the longest game ever.
Yeah, 6 overtimes is crazy.
Yeah. But then this sets up a very interesting scenario. Olympians have to play a game the very next day on January 7th. But because of how long this overtime fiasco was, they end up missing their overnight train. The team ends up missing that. So they can't make their train to go play against the Tri-City Blackhawks, who are the team they have to play on the 7th. So they're thinking, okay, we gotta go get on an airplane. Let's see what they have. They do find a charter plane, to where they need to go to play the Blackhawks. But there's only enough seats for the coach and 5 players. So they think, okay, let's just get the starters on. The coach handpicks the starters, which are Alex Groza, Ralph Beard, Leo Barnhorst, Mal McMullen, and Paul Walther. Puts them on the plane, they fly out, and then they play this game on January 7th, 1951, with no substitutes at all. The rest of the team waits for a bus and is supposed to arrive late to the game, but they don't get there in time. The rest of the roster arrives after the game has already ended. This is the only game in NBA history where the 5 starters play the entire game, and it's also one of the rare games where a player picks up 6 fouls, but they don't get ejected. McMullen had 6 personal fouls, but because the rest of the team was in a bus somewhere, the refs just said, okay, whatever, you can stay in. Surprisingly, this was actually a very close game, but the Blackhawks do come away with the win, 83-79.
I've never heard that before. That is really insane.
Yeah. I think Alex Groza, I believe, was the leading scorer, who's an interesting player in early NBA history. But anyway, that's my first weird game.
Okay.
Second one, January 7th, 1973, between the Philadelphia 76ers and the Seattle Supersonics. Now, this is the famous year where the Sixers lose 73 games. And this happens to be one of their only wins. So, the Sixers are 3-38 heading into this game, and the Sonics are 13-31. This is the fourth and final win under head coach Roy Rubin, producer of a Broadway play and a top 10 coach all time. Now, there's a bit of an interesting story about this. The Supersonics weren't nearly as bad as the Sixers were, but they were still pretty bad. Their head coach was a guy by the name of Tom Nasalki, who was an ABA Coach of the Year in 1972. He famously put like a hit, well, not like a hit, but he would tell his teams to go out and punch John Brisker, and he would give him $500 to do that. John Brisker wasn't like a famous like fighter and tough guy in the ABA. He'd say, first guy to deck Brisker gets $500.
Jesus.
So John Brisker is actually on the Supersonics team this year. So that's probably really awkward in the locker room. Spencer Haywood is on this Sonics team. He's the most famous name you've probably heard of. And a few other guys on the team are Jim McDaniels, Dick Snyder, future Cavs player who hits the famous Miracle at Richfield shot, downtown Freddie Brown, who was in his second year, I believe, and a few other role players you might be familiar with if you're into 70s NBA. Butch Beard, Bud Stallworth, and Jim Fox. And the Sonics do not like Nasalki.
Yeah.
They think he's running this team like a drill sergeant, basically, or drill instructor. That's what I get from this. So they concoct this plan to throw the game to get him fired. Allegedly, this was planned a month in advance. They were calling this the dump game. Just before tip-off, the players were whispering stuff like, Nasalki is going, to each other. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even though the Sonics are kind of trying to throw the game, it comes down to the wire, and I believe towards the end of the game, the Sixers are up, and the Sonics are trying to close that gap. In fact, every time they score, Rubin calls a timeout. He does this a couple of times. And when you call a timeout, you stop the clock, and then the opposing team is able to set up on defense. The Sixers are thinking, what the heck is Rubin doing? What is this, weird strategy? It gets so bad that at one point, Fred Carter, who gets the Sixers MVP at the end of the year, he starts shouting in the huddle, why did you do this? We're ahead.
Damn.
So it's 83-82 at this point. The Sonics are within 1 point. They have the ball in their hands the final seconds. They do have a chance to win, but Sixers guard Freddie Boyd gets a steal, and he's able to win it for Philadelphia. The game ends with a score of 85-82. Sixers win. Not soon after, Nasalki did get fired, and so did Roy Rubin. Now, after this game, a year goes by, and in November of 1973, this guy named Bob Briner, he writes an article in Sports Illustrated, and he's complaining about players nowadays, how they're entitled and selfish. Briner also mentioned that this game, the Sixers-Sonics game, and that the players were planning to get Nasauki fired. So this grabs the attention of the NBA, because soon after in December, an article in the New York Times goes out, Sonics dump game, and an investigation is started. But there was never any hard evidence found, so the NBA just sorta let the whole thing go.
That's what we need a video on that one.
Yeah.
Honestly, on both of them.